A very good morning to you and welcome to the Power Breakfast Show this Friday morning, coming to you live from the Communication Center here in Nairobi. We're hoping and trusting that you're well wherever you're joining us from this Friday morning here on the Power Breakfast Show. We're ready for you, ready to inform you, to educate you, and to entertain you. And as Mr. Njao always says,
oh, thank God it's Friday.
Thank God it's
Friday.
Yes. The day that is heavily anticipated by most.
Yes.
It being the last Friday of January, people have been paid.
No. Thank God January is gone.
Thank God January is over.
Actually, people are calling in January.
Yes, in January. One that has had 98 days and not the usual 31 days.
Yeah.
All right, good to see you, Mr. Njao. A lot going on in the world of print media.
Print newspapers. They have different stories today.
Yes.
The Standard continues with the story about the corruption or alleged corruption in the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Nation talks. It's a very positive story about the new National Housing Insurance Fund benefits.
Yes.
And it looks like they're going to be very nice.
It's going to be good. This is
the way it should be. It should have been doing. Otherwise, previously it used to be.
But the doctor's body have already come up, in arms saying, okay, fine, fantastic, but there should not be a cap.
Well, you can't have an insurance which has no cap.
Well, that's the argument they're having when it comes to universal healthcare. Anyway, we'll look at the stories. So that's the story that's big in the Daily Nation. The Standard, you said, is Tunoi. Probe confronts spy agency findings. The Star also has a very interesting...
people want to be governor of Nairobi.
Headline, yes.
Including one Mwau, one Waiguru, one Sonko, one Sakaja. And my friend...
Dennis
Waweru.
Together with Bishop Margaret.
And Bishop Margaret. And as I say, if Nairobians were interested in having a good government and remove Kidero, they would elect Waiguru.
Those are your thoughts. We'll be looking at. I'll be, asking you why, the reasons why.
If I was voting in Nairobi, I would vote Waiguru.
Alright, we'll have that conversation a bit later in the newspaper review. And then this morning, we won't talk about university education in your first interview. Yeah,
we are going to interview Professor Some, David Some, who is the Chief Executive of the Commission for University Education.
Yes.
Why is he allowing colleges to open mushroom and then go to close them? Why do they open in the first place?
Yeah, why do they open in the first place? That's a question we had the other day. We were asking the other day. Okay, so that's the first interview. Our second interview, there's a Kenya Music Week that's taking place. That's already started yesterday. And we'll be speaking to the organizers and some of the artists who have benefited from that. We want to understand what exactly its mandate is, how they go about selecting the artists who showcase their talent. So we'll be having that conversation with an organizer, a producer, as well as an artist, so you have to stay tuned for that. And then in entertainment, we have our beautiful friends. We've known them for a very long time. They'll be entertaining us a bit later. It's a trio of beautiful girls known as Q. You have to stay tuned for that because they have beautiful, magical voices. So they'll be coming up in a few minutes. And a quick reminder, 22422 is the SMS line should you want to get in touch with us this morning. Or you can get us on Twitter. The hashtag is Power Breakfast. We'd love to hear from you, so get communicating. For now, stories making headlines in the world of TV. Very good morning to you once again and welcome to the Power Breakfast News. I am Kirigo Ngarwam. The government has yielded to pressure and withdrawn the controversial proposed religious regulations that would have radically changed the way other churches and other faith-based organizations operate. Following a meeting with religious leaders in Nairobi, President Uhuru Kenyatta agreed to shelve the regulations pending consultations on the matter that saw churches accuse the government of infringing on the freedom of worship. Francis Oshiri has details of that in the following report.
The Religious Society rules published by the Attorney General's office early this month had ignited a contest pitting the government against religious leaders who felt targeted by the proposed regulations. But those regulations have been withdrawn. Following a meeting between President Uhuru Kenyatta and the religious leaders, the government was forced to retreat after the men and women of cloth threatened to mobilize their supporters to vote against the Jubilee administration in next year's general election, accusing the government of violating the freedom of worship enshrined in the Constitution.
Men that have heard from you, women.
The regulations were specifically meant to streamline the operations of religious organizations and weed out fake preachers who are minting millions of shillings by commercializing matters of faith. The regulations required all religious organizations to seek fresh registration from the Registrar of Societies and comply with all inspection requirements. The Attorney General had also required all preachers to be graduates of recognized theological colleges and have certificates of good conduct obtained from the Directorate of Criminal Investigations. These regulations would have locked out some flamboyant televangelists who have time and again been caught on the wrong side of the law. The regulations further required all foreign preachers to obtain work permits from the Immigration Department before being allowed to minister in the country. Foreign religious organizations would not have operated in the country without a clearance certificate from the Kenyan embassies in the home countries of the religious organizations for ease in tracing their origins and doctrines. To curb mushrooming of religious organizations, the rules required all centers of worship to submit their constitutions and file annual membership returns, including their tax compliance documents and details of all top leaders of the organizations to establish their relationship. Francis Deshuri, Public First News.
African countries have adopted a resolution to withdraw from the Rome Statute that establishes the International Criminal Court. The AU Executive Council rubber-stamped a report highlighting Africa's misgivings with the court during a meeting in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And as Sylvia Chebet reports, Africa's leaders are expected to adopt the document during a heads of state meeting to be addressed by President Uhuru Kenyatta over the weekend.
This Saturday, Africa's leaders converge again at the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa to make a statement on its relationship with the Hague-based court. They will adopt the report recommending a collective withdrawal of their nations from the Rome Statute that establishes the ICC.
Africa feels left out, Africa feels not listened to, Africa feels not responded to. And also Africa feels that even this time round, the only reason that we were able to make the progress that we made was because we had an African president of the Assembly of State Parties who understood the African terrain.
The decision by the trial court to apply Rule 68 that allows use of recanted testimony in the case against Deputy President William Ruto and journalist Joshua Sang aggravated the situation. Africa had agreed to the clause during the Assembly of States Parties on the assumption that it would only be applied in future cases, not on an ongoing case like that one against Ruto and Sang.
It cannot be true that as soon as we completed the Assembly of State Parties, the first thing that the court said about the decisions that had been taken there, right? The first thing that they said was that those decisions were irrelevant to the workings of the court, which basically means that the Assembly of State Parties is totally and completely useless.
It was against the basic principles of law and the rule of natural justice, they say.
If the Assembly has no bearing on what happens in the court, the same Assembly that actually created the court, right? If that's the truth, then we should scrap it. So there is no point in wasting resources and time sitting in a body that has absolutely no bearing on anything. Because if it has no bearing on the court, on what else does it have a bearing?
Africa has not shied from stating that the court is skewed against the continent, only chasing after African leaders, and that it has been acting on the behest of Western interests. President Omar al-Bashir has been a fugitive since the ICC issued a warrant of arrest against him in March 2009 on counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity.
In their face, believe it or not, we are nobody. This is not about President Bashir. This is not about Vice President Ruto. This is about us.
Because there are cases about Iraq against Bush and Tony Blair. They are not new cases, and we have not seen anything.
However, each state withdraws individually. In that case, Kenya will need to pass a bill in Parliament to amend the International Crimes Act. Afterwards, as stated in Article 127 of the Rome Statute, a state may write to the UN Secretary General notifying him of the intention to withdraw from the statute. The withdrawal shall take effect 1 year after the date of receipt of the notification. Sylvia Chebet for Power Breakfast News.
Health authorities across the world are alarmed by the outbreak of a mosquito-borne virus that has been blamed for severe birth defects in children. Nearly 4 million people have been infected with a first-spreading virus that has now been reported in more than 20 countries, mostly in South America. Kenyan health officials say the virus is found in the coast and northeastern regions, where locals have, however, developed immunity over the years. Esther Kahumbi Makori now reports.
It presents like a normal flu. The symptoms include fever, rashes, joint pain, muscle pain and headache. But it is its effect on unborn children that has health experts worldwide worried. The virus has been linked to the birth of children with smaller than usual brains, a condition medically known as microcephaly. According to the World Health Organization, the virus has spread to 23 countries in the past year, with 3 to 4 million infections. More than 4,000 of those have been reported in Brazil, which is the hardest hit by the virus. Named after Zika forest in Uganda, where it was first isolated, the virus is spread by a mosquito known as Aedes. It is found in tropical and subtropical areas around the world. And Kenya is no exception.
These are the same mosquitoes that can transmit other diseases like dengue and yellow fever. So, and those mosquitoes are very widely distributed around the world. And so we can't say that we don't have the mosquitoes here. The mosquitoes are present all over around the world.
According to Dr. Kiambo Njagi of the Malaria Control Unit in the Ministry of Health, Kenyan coast and northeastern areas have for years been known to have the virus, but the population in those areas have since developed immunity against it. The virus is therefore not of major public health concern in the country.
There's no need to panic. There's no cause for alarm. The virus has not been detected in any human cases so far. The only evidence we have is from historical work that was done.
There is no vaccine or known cure for those infected. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the virus can be found in the blood and passed from an infected person to another through mosquito bites during the first week of infection. Investigations are underway to establish whether it can be spread through sexual contact. El Salvador is the latest country to issue warnings to its women to delay pregnancy for 2 years as the virus spreads to more countries. Denmark is the latest European country to report cases of the Zika virus. Pregnant women in those countries remain at high risk, and while health experts here remain confident that Kenya has little to worry about, areas prone to the virus are being monitored closely. Esther Kahumbi Makori, Power Breakfast News.
Members of the National Hospital Insurance Fund can now access a treatment for such chronic illnesses as cancer, diabetes and hypertension using their NHIF cards. This follows a review of the NHIF's benefits to its contributors. The new packages include a rebate for chemotherapy at 25,000 shillings per session, radiology at 18,000 shillings per session, and monthly clinics for 5,000 shillings per month. Members will also access MRI scans for 15,000 shillings per session and CT scans for 8,000 shillings per session. Rebates for maternity and kidney dialysis services will also get a boost as normal deliveries will be footed at 10,000 shillings and cesarean section deliveries at 30,000 shillings. The NHIF will provide 10,000 shillings for every kidney dialysis session and 500,000 shillings for a kidney transplant, up from the previous rebate of 200,000 shillings. The NHIF has also increased inpatient cover by between 75% and 233%. This means NHIF will foot at 1,200 shillings per day for those accessing inpatient services at public hospitals and 4,000 shillings per day for those accessing inpatient medical services at private hospitals. Education Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i now says the ministry will take stern action against its officials under whose watch poor quality non-formal schools have been coming up. Matiang'i, who spoke while on an impromptu tour of non-formal schools in Nairobi's Kangware area, expressed his displeasure with conditions that learners have to endure in some of those institutions. Matiang'i, however, hailed the Bridge International Schools for its informal education initiative as he called for joint efforts to improve the quality of education at its institutions. Savituko reports.
The walk to quality education has proven long. Informal settlements the most affected. After hearing enough concerns over the Bridge International Academies, most of which operate without registration, the Cabinet Secretary chose to walk the long walk and see for himself conditions there.
How are you?
The unexpected guest was received with mixed feelings by his hosts. This was a fact-finding mission, and the first stop was to meet perhaps the most honest of sources, the children here.
Class 3, now in nursery. Very good. Sit down.
The management of the Gatina Bridge International School was at pains to explain how children 3 years apart in grade could be sharing a classroom.
So during lunch time they crowd together like this. They are not eating.
Excuse me, can you be sincere? Is this the way you teach?
No.
A review of the school's staffing put to test the management at pains to defend that they have 5 trained teachers with 3 more untrained, a provision they say is acceptable for non-formal schools. The early childhood school pupils who are forced to take the afternoon nap on the ground are concerned for the Cabinet Secretary. But the Bridge International Schools has defended their institution, saying that at the Gatina Center, 92% of KCPE candidates passed last year's exam, recording an average of 290 marks.
They do a fantastic job, to be very honest and to be very fair to them, because if they didn't have our children in their schools, where would they be?
A visit to a neighboring non-formal school by the name Wamo showed deplorable conditions. 15 boys have to share 7 beds, the youngest 3 share 1. They are homeless and thus are housed at the school.
We're going to come down hard on our ministry officials. We can't have this kind of... You guys have seen this thing. We have been around. Some of the school environments are neither safe nor conducive for learning.
After an afternoon-long tour, it was time to retreat to the policy-making office with a better-informed outlook as the Cabinet Secretary seeks to iron out creases in the ministry's service delivery.
Reports that former Cabinet Secretary Anne Waiguru is eyeing a grand entrance into the rough and tumble of politics by vying for the Nairobi's governor's seat have stirred excitement and speculation. Although the former devolution Cabinet Secretary is yet to officially declare her interest in the seat, the signs are pointing to a Waiguru candidature in 2017 as she begins a series of consultative weekend meetings here in Nairobi. Jackie Maribe puts the story in perspective.
She may have been away from the limelight since her exit from the cabinet late last year,
following my doctor's advice.
But Anne Waiguru is slowly but surely making a comeback in public circles thanks to the interest generated by news that she wants to vie for the Nairobi governor's seat in the 2017 general election. Waiguru is yet to declare publicly she will be gunning for the gubernatorial seat currently held by Dr. Evans Kidero. But the man fired by Governor Kidero this week from the environment docket in the Nairobi County government, Evans Ondieki, has given a strong hint Waiguru will go for the seat. Addressing a meeting in Nairobi yesterday, Ondieki said he will back Waiguru, who insists has all the qualities to replace Kidero.
A woman who has given birth, who has come to labor for 8 or 7 hours.
Waiguru has previously steered clear of the topic, only telling Citizen TV that she would consult widely before deciding whether to delve into politics.
I don't know. I mean, who knows the future?
For the first time,
Waiguru has scheduled a series of consultative meetings with opinion leaders, including women groups in Nairobi, starting this coming weekend. This Saturday, she is expected in Embakasi, where Ondieki is said to be eyeing a parliamentary seat. During her stint in cabinet, Waiguru oversaw the rise of the National Youth Service and crisscrossed the country opening projects targeting the youth and women. Her increased visibility and perceived closeness with President Uhuru Kenyatta saw her become a vilified target of the opposition coalition for reforms and democracy, CORD, which claimed her ministry's flagship project was riddled with corruption. And when the pressure became too much to bear after the NYS corruption scandal, she called it a day, insisting she was not corrupt and will always hold her head high.
This issue mutated, and that's what I said in my resignation. Mutated from a fight against corruption to a personal attack on me.
She appears to be targeting the Jubilee Alliance support base in Nairobi, given that Ferdinand Waititu, who was the representative of the president's party in the last election, has shifted his political base to Kiambu County. Even Sondieki's support too means that Waiguru will also be targeting voters from the Abagusi community, who hold a substantial chunk of voters in the capital city. This is because Waiguru's camp has reportedly identified a candidate from that community who was eyeing the gubernatorial seat in 2013 as a potential running mate. Jackie Maribe, Power Breakfast News.
Kenya and Nigeria, which have suffered the brunt of violent extremism and terror attacks in recent months, have committed to forge a stronger partnership in defeating the Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram terror outfits. Fighting terrorism featured strongly during bilateral talks held at State House, Nairobi yesterday between President Uhuru Kenyatta and his Nigerian counterpart Muhammadu Buhari. Other key issues, including trade, agriculture and education, also featured in the talks. Alex Kubasu tells us more.
The visit by the Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari to Kenya gave a chance to the two countries that have borne the brunt of violent extremism and terrorist attacks to join hands in combating a problem that threatens to dent the image of the two regional powerhouses. Tackling the threat of terror featured prominently during bilateral talks between President Kenyatta and President Buhari at State House, Nairobi.
Call upon your government to remain steadfast in supporting the government of the Federal Republic of Somalia in its national reconciliation and reconstruction efforts.
To win the war on terror, therefore, we must respond to this phenomenon by developing new and versatile strategies.
Kenya is still reeling from the aftermath of the terrorist attack on the Kenya Defense Forces camp in El Ade, Somalia, while Nigeria yesterday suffered a Boko Haram attack in the northern part of the country, killing 10 Nigerians. The two leaders, however, say the attacks have only strengthened their resolve to destroy the Al-Shabaab and the Boko Haram respectively. The two nations have moved to strengthen their trade ties by forming a special council of business leaders. In addition to agreements signed between Kenya and Nigeria during the state visit by Buhari's predecessor Goodluck Jonathan back in 2013, new agreements on agriculture, tourism and trade have been signed today.
My government is ready to work closely, Your Excellency, with your government to support the private sector by removing any policy or regulatory constraints that might discourage a healthy business environment.
Today we have visas on arrival for general travelers into our countries, as well as visa exemptions for holders of diplomatic passports.
Kenya and Nigeria enjoy a cordial relationship, with Nigeria having a footprint in the country's financial sector, where 3 Nigerian-owned banks are operating. Alex Kubasu, Power Breakfast News.
Deputy President William Ruto has called for an end to infighting between governors and their deputies. The Deputy President observed that wrangling between the two offices was affecting delivery of services in the counties. Addressing the Council of Deputy Governors in Naivasha, Ruto agreed that the role of the Deputy Governors was not clear and hence the need for the Senate to move fast and define the said roles.
The best way to get to the next level
is to do the job you have well. You cannot succeed your boss by bringing him down. You support your boss, you will succeed your boss if you do your job well and support him. It's either you swim together or you sink together. And much more importantly, as a philosophy that I believe in, if you aren't ready to be led, then you are not the material to lead.
The High Court in Nairobi has sentenced a woman and 3 of her relatives to death for stabbing her co-wife's 18-month-old daughter. The woman, whose co-wife was initially her house help, said jealousy drove her to plot the murder of the baby. Evelyn Omboy has the details.
Elena Nyambura is in the dock for a crime she is accused of committing back in 2009. Her accuser, seated across in the courtroom, was her former house help back then in Nairobi's Kariobangi estate before Elena's husband took her in as his second wife. Elena, charged for conspiring with these 3 others to, on the 2nd of August 2009, kill her now co-wife's 18-month-old daughter by stabbing her 11 times. Justice Fred Ochieng heard how Elena confessed that the husband loved the other wife's child more than he did hers, and how anger drove her to commit the heinous act. He also heard how, after 7 years, Elena had changed her ways and was deeply remorseful for the act. Elena and her 3 accomplices were all sentenced to death for the murder of the 18-month-old baby girl. Evelyn Omboy, Power Breakfast News.
Now, one of the Kenya Defence Forces soldiers killed in the El Ade attack in Somalia was buried at Mshale Cemetery in Likoni in Mombasa yesterday. Juma Zahoro's former colleagues gathered by his resting place to pay their last respects for the soldier who was hailed as a hero. We have these and other stories in our news roundup.
Sorrow engulfed relatives and friends when the body of one of the fallen Kenya Defence Forces soldier was flown from Nairobi to Mombasa for burial. In Mombasa, the body was moved to Masjid Darul Aloom for prayers. There was heavy presence of military personnel as KDF soldiers bid farewell to Zahora, who leaves behind a wife and 2 children. And the High Court in Mombasa has today ruled that 2 men accused of having participated in the killing of 60 people in Peketoni area in Lamu County have a case to answer. Making the ruling, Justice Martin Muya said the prosecution had tabled sufficient evidence indicating that the 2 were directly involved in the Peketoni massacre, and directed that the 2, Diani Salim Suleiman and Mahadi Suleiman Mahadi alias Jesus, defend themselves against the accusations. The 2 are alleged to have participated in the killing of more than 60 people on the night of June 2014 at Mpeketoni area in Lamu County, and the torching of houses when suspected Al-Shabaab members raided the area. Elsewhere, a 42-year-old police constable based in Kirwea Police Station and who has been in the service for 22 years has been killed by his 26-year-old girlfriend at Kirwea town in Kirinyaga County, only 300 meters from the police station where his girlfriend has rented a house. Confirming the incident, Kirinyaga Police Commander Rono Budne said the woman, who is an employee of the Kirinyaga County government, used a kitchen knife and stabbed the police officer in the chest before rushing him to Kirwea Medical Center, where he succumbed to the injuries.
Let's now have a look at regional news. And satellite images show 5 possible mass graves on the outskirts of Burundi's capital at sites consistent with testimony by witnesses who accused security forces of killing dozens of people in December. This is according to Amnesty International. Witnesses said graves were dug on the afternoon of December 11th, and before and after images and video footage show disturbed earth at 5 sites in the Buringa area of the edge of Bujumbura. On December 11th, gunmen attacked military bases, and UN Human Rights Chief Zaid Al-Hussein said the authorities responded with house searches, arrests, and alleged summary executions. The United Nations has said it is also analyzing satellite images to investigate witness reports of at least 9 mass graves in and around the capital Bujumbura, including one in a military camp containing more than 100 bodies in total. Right, that story marks the end of the Power Breakfast News for this hour. Many thanks for joining us. Like I told you, we have some beautiful ladies in studio with us this morning, known as Q, very talented. You don't believe me? Well, they're up next.